Welcome, everyone, to this week's Coaches Connect. Today, I am joined by a guest of honor, Jessica Freeman, also Jess of Jess Creatives. Actually, I have it here. I was going to share Jess's Instagram here just so y'all can find her before I forget and say hello. I see Bernadette's on video. Thanks for popping on, Bernadette, as well. And Jess, I want to actually pass the mic to you for a second, just so you can do like a little intro. Like when people,
Yeah.
the question I ask is like when you're at a neighborhood picnic and you like run into a neighbor that you don't necessarily know, and they say, "So what do you do?" Like, how do you
Mhm.
answer that question?
Yeah. So I usually say I run my own business. I do web design and SEO for health and fitness professionals, which is pretty much that's what I do. I Most of my business is one-to-one work. I don't really do programs or courses or much of that. So I'm very one-to-one. I've been in business for 14 years and I've worked with lots and lots of fitness coaches, nutritionists, dietitians, all kinds of people in the wellness space. And yeah, I love to nerd out about anything with websites, SEO, tech stuff, any of that.
I love it. What's the story? Like, how did you get to website design and how did you get to narrow in onto the health and fitness pros? Because I'm feeling like there's a story there where maybe you
Hmm.
were a health and fitness pro yourself or something else. But I would imagine that when most people starting out as website designers, they don't
Hmm.
necessarily start with that narrow of a niche, but that niche presents itself over time. How
Hmm.
did it happen
Yeah.
for you?
So I decided in high school that I was going to be a designer. So I actually started as a graphic designer. I did study a little bit of website design in college as well, but 2 years after I graduated, I was able to actually take my freelance full time and take do Just Creatives full time. And in the beginning, I worked with anybody, everybody. I was designing for local colleges and also designing the side of box trucks. It was like a very wide range. And over time, kind of started narrowing that down to small businesses, service-based businesses. And then it was in 2018 that I decided to niche down, like I should say, start niching down to health and fitness. And that was after some advice just from like business coaches and lots of conversations going on online. And one of the ways that people recommended niching down was like, what do you have experience with? Who do you enjoy working with? And I'm a type 1 diabetic. I've been diabetic since I was 3. And so health and fitness has always been a big part of my life. I'm at the gym most days and have competed in like Spartan races and all that kind of fun stuff. And so I really genuinely enjoy like the content that my clients put out. I've hired several of my clients because I'm like, well, now I need your services. Or like, I'm like, I have this. Like a few years ago, I was diagnosed with some thyroid issues and immediately was like, hey, client, like, is this something you can help me with? Or do you know somebody who specializes in this? And so I have a very vested interest in this space. And I know personally, like, how important it is to invest in nutrition and your health and that kind of thing. And having not worked, but having dealt with a lot of doctors and the healthcare system, like, I know especially like nutrition is such a big part of our health. And so that's really kind of how I decided to get into that niche. So no, I'm not a nutrition coach or former nutrition coach or anything of that nature, but I'm very, very interested in all of the information. So,
I love it. Well, I'm about to ask you something about that and point something out for folks on the call. But meanwhile, as I do that, if you have access to chat, I would love to pop for you to pop into the chat and let us know if you have a website or not as a health and fitness pro. And
mhm.
if you do, and if you feel comfortable, pop a link in there, so we can kind of compare and contrast. We can talk about it. I'll share my website, which is a whole other thing, but I'm more than happy to be the case study for to give her like a little initial Looky Loo. But meanwhile, for I just used Looky Loo. I'm gonna hang up now. This is this is it. I need another coffee. But what I want to point out for folks, the reason I really wanted to have Jess on the call today is actually twofold. And there's some things that Jess shared now. Like I'm so happy I asked and so happy to learn this about you, Jess, is that in these calls, because our audience here is very much coaches.
Hmm.
I love running these calls in a way that is like I call meta coaching because on one hand we talk coaching, but I constantly zoom out and say, "Did you guys see what we just did? Like, did you see what the question I asked, or did you see like how we can reframe or rephrase?" So with Jess, I think that it's so cool to have her here because it's really twofold. On one hand, obviously, Jess is a designer who does websites for health and fitness pros, and everyone kind of is like, okay, this is relevant. But I think that there's another layer here, and that layer is the fact that Jess is a business owner whose bread and butter is one-on-one work, right? Like, which is actually very similar to some of the coaches here. Like, I mean, I know I talk to health and coaches all the time that kind of feel like the pressure to create a course, right? Or create a membership or get into group coaching. Meanwhile, they really enjoy the one-on-one. And Jess is someone who like, no, like this is what I do. What
Hmm.
I do is work with people one-on-one. So that really stood out to me. And I wanted to draw that parallel for all of you here. And also, the other piece is that niching down thing, right? Which I think would be relevant to everyone here, where when you start, you do work with anyone and everyone. And I don't really think that's necessarily a wrong thing. That's often the most accessible way to start.
Hmm.
But as you do that, as we accumulate reps under our belt, certain populations they start to emerge, and that population might be just who we are. Like that's why I asked Jess, like, have you been a nutritionist in the past? Because sometimes that's the way, but sometimes it's just like, hey, honestly, that's just the group I like. That's the group I'm interested in, and this is the content that I like, right? If I wanted to shift into web design for some reason, I won't. Nobody needs that. But I think I can see myself being interested in like topic X, Y, and Z. But there's plenty of topics. Like I don't think I would ever want to build websites for like accounting firms because that's just not something that I have like interest and passion in. So I really appreciate that. All right. Well, if you want to pop in the chat, we have folks here sharing websites. So let's see. We have Melissa has a website that just built, I think. Yes.
Hmm. Yes.
So there we go. Anna has a domain, but not a website yet. Bernadette has a website. Melissa has had a website since 2015, built it herself originally, and then just gave it a huge update. Um, Dana has a landing page with a freebie, but no website yet through Flowdesk. Awesome. Okay, well, thanks for sharing that, you folks. Okay, so let's kind of start off with the question that tends to float around when it comes to websites. And meanwhile, please use the chat to pop in any questions as they come. Just one of the things that I see all the time is health and coaches that are starting out and
Hmm.
they ask, do I need a website? And I'm actually wondering if you and I are going to disagree here, and then we're going to get into this big fight. And that's always interesting, dramatic, so everyone could just settle in and watch. So, just how would you respond, knowing that you're a biased party here? So tell
Yes, I am biased. So I definitely don't think you need a website to start. Like, you don't, I was designing before I ever had a website because of connections, friends, family, etc. So like I was designing and I hadn't named it Just Creatives yet, but I was doing freelance work without a website. So I think you can start offering services without it, but I think that's only going to take you so far. And I know a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, I've just been like operating off of Instagram or Facebook and like I have a Google form and that's like my application and that's how people find me. And I always point out, like, I have a sister who's a millennial. I have my dad who's in his like 60s or whatever, whatever. And neither of them are very active on Instagram. Like, I constantly remind people there are millions of people not on Instagram or Facebook or whatever other platform. And so while yes, you might think like, oh, well, I work with millennial moms or men of whatever age or whatever it is, and you think like, oh, my audience is there. Not everyone is. And I feel like, especially in the last few years, I've seen a lot of people who are just like tired of social media. They're burnt out. They don't want to like deal with everything that's on social media. And so you're missing out on all these other people who aren't on social media. And I even think about even outside of my family, like I'm in a book club, and while those friends are on social media, they are hardly active on Instagram. And I reference Instagram because I feel like a lot of my clients at least are very active on Instagram and kind of prioritize that platform for getting clients. And I'm like, none of these women are super active on Instagram. And so I just want you to not miss out on people out there who are also searching because there are billions of searches. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head because it probably changes year to year, but billions of Google searches every day, every week that are happening and people are searching for the type of services you offer. And some people just don't use social media all the same way. Like some people are strictly there for fun and memes and friends. They're not looking for like, oh, I want to follow this nutrition account, this fitness account, this parenting account. Like some keep it strictly fun. And so I just like to remind people that you can absolutely prioritize Instagram and like use that to connect with people, but don't ignore a website thinking like, oh, well, everyone is on Instagram and I'm just finding clients there because there's a whole lot of other people that you
Well,
could
just
be interacting.
I guess what I'm thinking about also here is that sometimes folks talk about like the social media burnout is real, and it's like, do I create a YouTube channel or should I be on Threads? Because Threads is a thing now, and should I be
Mm-hmm.
there as well? And there's Snapchat and Facebook and LinkedIn. And I think when it comes to social media platforms, you're never going to be in all places. Like
Right.
not without, a whole team that does nothing but repurpose content across platforms. So most business owners will pick one or two platforms and kind of be there consistently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's one of those things that you were saying, like not missing out. Like if I'm picking Instagram as my main platform, that's fine, right? But if that's the only place I am, if someone's actually on LinkedIn primarily, then
Mm-hmm.
they might never find me. Meanwhile,
Right.
I actually have a website, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Instagram. So I really think of it, I don't know if you agree with this analogy. I kind of think of your website as the closest thing we have in a virtual space to real estate. Like,
Mm-hmm.
right, like to our house. Like we
Yeah.
go to the gym to work out, and we go to the grocery store to buy food, and we go to the nightclub to dance. But it's like our website is the house, is where our base is. I don't know. Does that make sense as an
Yes.
analogy?
Yes, absolutely. And especially one other thing I want to point out is since the pandemic, since COVID, like buyer psychology and just like buyer habits has shifted and there's a lack of trust online. And so people are more hesitant to buy, not just because of like finances or uncertainty, but because there was a big boom of coaches and businesses and everything when everyone was at home and like, oh, I have nothing else to do. Let me start a business. People got burned, they lost money, etc. And so people are much more cautious when wanting to work with someone. And so they are going to want to look at more than just your Instagram. They're going to want to say like, what does Kate offer? Like, what's her experience? Who does she like? I can only learn so much through Instagram, and they want to see what what else you offer. They want to see pricing and testimonials, and Instagram is just not a website. It's like we can communicate a lot of things through Instagram, but they also want to see a website. Like that's such a big part of building that trust with people. Like even if they are DMing back with you back and forth, they're going to want to also hop over to the website, look at things, and then come back and like keep chatting with you. Like they want to verify.
Well, and I'm thinking like how like I always encourage folks to consider their own like buying journey. Like
Mm-hmm.
how did you go about finding the last person you hired for whatever, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
so if you've been coming to these calls for a while, you know how incredibly protective I am of this community. So trust me when I say I creep on people for a long time before inviting them. And just like it just doesn't know any of this that I'm about to disclose, but like how, like what was the process of me inviting Jess to co-host one of these calls? I came across Jess on Threads first. Right. And I saw Jess pop up because we have some common people in common that we both follow. And therefore, some of her responses, some of her posts have found their way into like my feed. Cool, you're with me, right? Like, so that's kind of how I came across her first. Now, after a little bit of seeing a couple of posts, I followed Jess on Threads. So now I'm seeing her posts more consistently. Okay, so she didn't sound like a psychopath. In fact, she actually sounded quite nice, right? So at that point, I am now going where? Where do I go next? Jess, where did I go next? What do you
I'm
think?
assuming my website.
No, I went to your
Oh,
Instagram.
oh,
So from
Instagram. Yes.
Threads, I went to your Instagram, and that kind of like that's like the body of content, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like so I learned a little bit more because now I'm scrolling down, not very far. None of us scroll very far, but to kind of see like what kind of things Jess talks about. What are the reels saying? Because now I get to see Jess in real time talk, right? Not just text on screen. I
Mm-hmm.
see her face. I start learning a little bit more about her. Jess is like so creeped out right now.
No, I'm not.
Right. But at the same time, I think you all know, like I'm verbalizing something we all do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, just like when I found you on Instagram, I kind of poked around. I think I followed you on Instagram. I might have said hello. At that point, I'm checking out your website. Now, here's
Mm-hmm.
what's interesting is that that's actually where that journey can end sometimes. Because if I find someone on Instagram and they don't have a website to go to, that cuts me off, right? Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
have anywhere else to go. And that's really what Jess talks about is like, well, give me even more, give
Mm-hmm.
me that depth, right? Nothing wrong like with just maybe not having a website. I think I would find it strange that as a designer, as a website designer, just didn't have a website. But
That would be weird.
for a nutrition coach, maybe it wouldn't be as strange. However, this may or may not be an accurate perception, but in my head, I would make a judgment about whether or not somebody has a website, about how long they've been in the field and how serious they're about it.
Mm-hmm.
Jess,
Agreed.
feedback. I just outed myself as having creeping you for weeks.
Well, one, I actually think it's really good that you vet your speakers. So I'm not creeped out because if anything, like I think that's very similar to other like clients and stuff. Like they creep on me. Like Melissa and I were connected on Instagram for many years. Like, I don't even know. And we would just interact with each other, anything like that. And then eventually she DM'd me and was like, "Hey, I need a website." Or not a website. She needed a refresh. So I think that's very similar. Like we creep on each other, but we want that depth. And I agree a lot with like if someone doesn't have a website, I'm definitely assuming they are newer in business, which is fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with being newer in business, but for some people, that might be a deal breaker. They might be like, oh, I have a very complex problem that I need help with. I want somebody who's been in business longer. Whereas if you, even if you are newer in business, one, don't broadcast that on your website. That's something that I actually, when I do like website audits and that kind of thing, I'm like, don't broadcast that you just started last year because you still have the education, the expertise, the certification. whatever it is to still help people. And so, like, don't downplay your own business, your own expertise, but we want to build that trust, not just, oh, here's another nutrition coach on Instagram, but like someone who's actually running a business that I can trust with my health.
Yeah. Well, and just I think also like because sometimes folks feel like they're like hiding something if they don't like super explicit about the fact that they're new. But I
Mm-hmm.
actually compare it to the same way. Like imagine me getting on a coaching call, even this one, right? Like so this coaching call right here, it's 11:30 my time. If I had a really shitty night of sleep and I'm actually just not feeling super well, which happens, and 9 times out of 10 you'd never know because I've been doing this long enough, right? You just kind of like turn on and off you go, right? But at the same time, you see how there is really no good reason for me to get on a call and say, really not at my best today, you guys. Really had a really shitty night. That's not helpful to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
That is not pertinent information to you. And I have just impacted your experience negatively, possibly for no reason, right? Like my job is to show up and do my best. And so is
Mm-hmm.
yours.
Yep.
Melissa was saying, work with so many clients who've never connected with me on any social media platform and are not on my email list. They found my website because they Googled their problem and found me through SEO, which is probably like the dream scenario for a lot of people, especially folks who are kind of dreading social media a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Anna is asking, and I see Dana then has a question. So Anna's curious, did you design your website with a fitness vibe? I'm actually curious, you're the one that designed your own website, yes?
Are you me? Are you
Yeah.
asking me? Yes. Yeah, I designed my own website. And yes, it does have kind of a fitness health vibe. The language is definitely very targeted to that niche as well. I mean, I don't have like pictures of me like carrying dumbbells and a laptop or anything, but the messaging is very targeted, and I really love like making sure your website really reflects your personality. Um, and so, yeah, I definitely catered it towards this niche. Whereas before it was more generalized, like just talking to business owners, not health and fitness.
Well, and just that's one of the things I also like noticed. I mean, I loved your Instagram, just even checking out the posts and the reels because you can kind of zoom out and see how you are talking about web design. But I
Mm-hmm.
have felt very directly spoken to as a health
Mm-hmm.
and fitness professional, like, right? Because it's just all the examples are targeted. Like you're talking about things that would apply to web design across the board,
Mm-hmm.
like your examples, your wording, the things that you use, the particular problems, the example clients are all within that space. And that's
Mm-hmm.
really what, when I like look at your content versus content of any other general web designer, to me, it immediately feels like, well, Jess knows more. She
Mm-hmm.
understands more like my problem because she's talking to
Yeah.
me directly.
Yeah. Agreed.
Uh,
Agreed.
Dana, you have your hand up. Go for it.
Thanks. Yeah, internet is unstable, so I'm going to keep my video off. But yeah, I know we were talking about websites, and I know you said sort of that like talking about the fact that like you're just starting out or in your first year is sort of not encouraged or suggested rather. But I wonder if like if that's the same, and I know we're not talking about social media, but like what's that line between being sort of quote unquote authentic and being like, hey, I'm learning and I'm like, this is where I am in my coaching journey, which is just starting out versus like, yeah, being like, well, I still know more than you do.
Um, my take, if you want me to share, Kate,
Yeah. Oh,
so for like for your website, I think one just talking about, making sure you're sharing your expertise and like just positioning yourself that you are the expert here. From a social media perspective, I don't think there's anything wrong with like, I mean, when I'm taking, looking at SEO courses or like with all AI stuff, like talking about how AI is changing SEO and that kind of thing, my people don't expect me to just like already know this. They know that like things are changing. And I think especially with health and nutrition and fitness, like there's new research, there's new things that come out. And so I think it's totally fine to talk about like, oh, like I saw this new article come out, this new research come out, and that kind of thing. And I've seen plenty of coaches who are like, oh, I'm getting certified for X, Y, and Z. And I mean, I even saw a coach she's a fitness coach that I follow. She's been in business as long as I have. So like 10 plus years. And she just got recertified for something. I don't even remember what it was. And it's something that I know is, I don't want to say basic, but it's like something that a lot of people like do early on. She had just let her certification lapse. And so she was like, she didn't make a huge deal out of it. And she wasn't like, oh, like I'm studying for this, whatever. But like once she passed, she was like, oh, by the way, like I let this lapse, got the certification again. It is what it is. We're back. And it was like not her, it wasn't like her basic fitness. It was like a extra thing. But I think it's fine to like be honest about like, oh, I'm getting extra training, extra certification, anything like that, because if anything, that helps position you as like, I'm investing more in my own education to help you even better. Um, and so I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about that.
Well, just what I'm hearing you talk about is really like focusing on what you have versus what you don't,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think you will see folks, I think, very rightly leaning into their newness when it comes to promoting a pilot program or starter rates, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely the thing to do. But Dana, to your question, like where's that line? The one question that I ask, and it can be a harsh question because we really need to kind of consider the truth, is who is it for? Who is it for, right? Like when I stand up and say, oh, I'm only starting out, I'm just a beginner, like, is this actually for your clients or are you trying to just appease your own insecurity? Because if it's the latter, and it often is, I say boo-hoo and suck it up, right? Because it's not about you, it's about the clients. So show up for your clients, for your prospective clients, for your former clients, for your current clients. Just like if I were to show up today, right? If I had a shitty night of sleep and I wasn't feeling well, and I announced that in the beginning, who would that be for? Chances are that would have been for me. I was
Mm-hmm.
worried maybe about not delivering or not doing as good of a job as I normally do. And I just want to like, you know, take the pressure off myself. That's not for you all. That's for me. And therefore, I can take it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can admit that. I can just focus on doing as good job of a job as I can. I'm curious if folks here actually have any like website related questions, like whether it's like what should a website have, or somebody was asking, Hey Sang was wondering, how is the trend of SEO priority ranking changing? I have no idea what that means, but I know Jess does. So.
I'm assuming you can correct me. I'm assuming she's just kind of asking like the trend of just SEO, like and ranking and prioritizing that, especially with AI. If that's not what you mean,
Hey
let
Sang,
me
go
know.
for it.
Yeah, sorry. Um, yeah, so just in terms of, your website coming up, the better,
Mhm.
having a better chance of your website popping up in the search
Yeah.
engine,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
there's
So,
so many out there. And just to add to that question, like how important is blogging? And when you're blogging, what kind of information is like I guess it's part of this SEO question in terms of like, what is rated higher? What,
mm, Yeah, good
Yes.
questions. So, for SEO and like ranking, it's still a priority. I would say you want to focus. This is where having a niche really comes in handy because it's going to be very difficult for any of you to to show up for just nutrition coaching. Like that's so broad. Not saying it can't ever happen, but it's not just going to happen like in a year. It's going to take quite a while. So having a niche where it's like you're optimizing for nutrition coaching for women over 40, for new moms, for whatever, like having some kind of niche is going to help. And also, like, just real quick with AI, because lots of people are asking me about, like, oh, like, does it matter? One, I had a client inquire with me, like, in the last month. She literally found me because if you've heard or seen the Google, like, AI summary, like, you Google something and that AI summary pops up, my site was linked. Like, she Googled a question about a website platform that I had blogged about, and my site was linked and it was me talking about why you shouldn't use Wix. And she was thinking about using Wix. So she read my blog post and then inquired. And she literally said in the inquiry form, you showed up in the Google AI summary. And then I've had a client who, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, messaged me and um, she was like, we got a client because of ChatGPT. Someone went to ChatGPT and was like, show me whatever it was, like local companies, and they showed up. Like in like ChatGPT gave a list of results and they showed up number one in that list. And so like yes, there's AI, but AI can still link to you and show you. So like don't ignore SEO just because of AI. Now, to your question about blogging, blogging is very, very helpful. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to blog forever and ever. It doesn't mean that you have to blog 3 times a week. If anything, Google is prioritizing longer, more comprehensive blogs. So if you had to choose between shorter blogs every week or one blog post that's longer and do just one per month, I would tell you to do the one per month. And by longer, I mean trying to aim for like 900 to 1,000 words in a blog post. Um, and so I'm seeing personally for myself and for my clients, blog posts are getting more traffic and ranking better than individual like sales pages, your homepage, anything like that. Doesn't mean we shouldn't still optimize because Google still wants to like get a good sense of what you're about. But the last few Google algorithm updates have literally been called helpful content updates. And they really are prioritizing helpful content, which is why longer posts are doing better also. It doesn't mean you have to have, like when I said 800 to 1,000 words, that's not like a, if you have 700 words, Google's not going to rank you. It's just, it does better because imagine, I always give the analogy of like your website and a book. And if I go to the library and I'm wanting to learn about women's nutrition and you just hand me a brochure, okay, well, like how much am I going to learn about women's nutrition in a brochure versus a book that's like 500 pages? And so we want to think of your uh, website as like a book. Not that you have to have 500 pages, just a disclaimer, but like we want to think of you as a book and like you want to position yourself as a resource for this niche or this demographic. And so I really love to recommend blogging. Um, Even if you even just create like like a dozen or 2 dozen blog posts that are really comprehensive and those just kind of like hang out on your site. I do think still blogging occasionally, even after you have those big, like comprehensive posts, would still be good because Google also pays attention to how often you're updating your site. And so if you haven't posted a blog post since 2016, okay, well, like that's not recent relevant information necessarily, especially when it comes to health and nutrition and there's new research and there's new findings and new products and everything like that. Like Google wants to see like, oh, okay, like this site now has another post about this topic. So, um, all that to say, I recommend blogging. Don't feel like it has to be weekly or multi times a week. Even if you can do once a month, like that would be beneficial. I do recommend, like, if you have a brand new site or like you just have not blogged at all, I usually recommend my clients try to do like launch your site and then for the first 3 months, do a weekly post. And then after that, you can move to once a month or something like, or every other month or whatever is doable, just so that you are really showing Google, like, look at all this information. Like, look at how much I know. I'm really like knowledgeable about this. You're kind of like trying to show off because if you launch your site and you only have one blog post and 5 pages, again, like the brochure versus the book, it's going to take a long time for you to turn into a book, quote unquote, and for Google to trust you. Because that's one of the big things is Google wants to trust you, especially in the health space. That's something else that kind of not like shifted, but they got more particular during the pandemic about really wanting to make sure they are prioritizing credible, reputable sources for health related topics. And so that's another reason y'all need longer blog posts and more blog posts basically, to show that like, hey, I know what I'm talking about. This isn't just
Well, and I'm
some,
hearing also it's a long game, right? Like we're
yeah,
talking about building up, like when we are talking about blogging in the long form content on the website, I'm kind of really hearing you say like talk about building up body of work, building
yes.
up body of knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
showcasing expertise and showcasing it consistently over time. And just like, Google is not going to rank your website as highly if your last blog post was coming out in 2016, but neither will a prospective client if they come on your website and see that the last blog post has been from 2016, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the things we've talked about buyer's journey a little bit. Like this is one of the things I pay attention to as when I creep, when I lurk, right? Whether it's a copywriter, a website designer, or a running coach or a strength coach that I want to hire, I see how consistent they are. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
this is often why the strength coach I'm currently working with, I've been following him for 2 years before I hired him. And one of the things I watch for is how consistent folks are, because sometimes they're very consistent for a week or 2 months, and then they fall off the face of the earth for 3 months. There might be a perfectly reasonable explanation for it, but as a prospective client, I kind of go, well, okay, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't want them to fall off the face of the earth on me. So yeah, I see Dana was asking why shouldn't you use Wix, and you have you
I have
have
a blog post about it.
you have a blog post about it. Nicely done. I love
Yes.
that. So
Um, and
thanks
I
for
will say, like talking about like the longevity, that post ranks pretty well, and that post is from 2021.
Mhm.
So, and it's still relevant, like all the information is still accurate, in my opinion, still stands. But I have posts even from like 2018, 2017 that still bring traffic to my website. I don't have a single post even from 2024 that's still Instagram posts from 2024 that people are seeing or finding, unless they're like Kate and they're creeping on me and scrolling back. But they're
That's
not organically bringing in traffic, and
that is
so
that's such a great observation though, because as far as half-life, like that can be so frustrating when you're creating and posting content on social media. Like it's literally 2 days and it's done, right? Like if
yeah.
the vast majority of people's views and comments and likes are going to happen in like the 24 hours. And
Hmm.
then if something is a month old, it's gone. It's gone
Yeah.
down the feed. We forgot all about it. Might as well repost it again because no one remembers. So even that like longevity of the fact that there can be a piece of content that somebody mentioned, I talked to someone yesterday, they're like, I saw that post that you put up on Instagram that really stuck with me, and it was like 50 grams of protein by noon or something. I know that she was creeping me. She was checking
Mhm.
me out because she had to scroll quite far down to find that post. We're still talking a couple of months though. Like we're
Yeah.
like right, like if you're really checking somebody out, like you're going back a few weeks, maybe a few months to have a piece of content that's still bringing in interest and traffic from 2 years ago. Like
Mhm.
my fingers tired. I'm not going to scroll.
Right.
Period, right? So somebody was wondering, you said you do website audits. What
Mhm.
does that mean? Like, what do you do for a website audit?
Yeah, so that's part of my one-on-one accelerator. So it's still like a one-to-one capacity, but I go through and look at design, copy, layout, make recommendations for all of that to make sure that it's more clear, it looks more professional, anything like that. I can also look at SEO, obviously, like do do that. I have a separate like just SEO offer as well that also includes like an SEO audit. So if you're like, oh, I really just want to lean into the SEO part, then that's where I look at like more of the technical stuff. Like, are you formatting text correctly? So one thing that a lot of people don't realize is how you format text on your website plays into SEO. So for those of you who already have a website, you have your text boxes or like whatever on your website, and like you can choose if it's a heading, if it's bold, italic, whatever. Um, if you are choosing like heading one, heading two, heading three, that plays into SEO. So you're only supposed to have one heading one per page, and then everything else should be heading two or heading three. And a lot of people, when they're DIYing, one just don't know that. But they are usually multiple H1s per page, or they're like, oh, I really want to make this whatever stand out. So I'm going to make it a bigger font. So I'm going to make it heading three, and it's an entire paragraph or like list that is heading three. And I'm like, well, that's not supposed to be a heading. That's supposed to be just paragraph formatting. So that plays into your SEO as well. So while it might be like, oh, but it looks better, like I like the design of it. If you care about SEO, like you really shouldn't do that. So something to think about. Um,
Thank you. Sure, if you have your hand up, go ahead.
Yes, hi everyone. I have a question that might be relevant to many. I'm not sure, I'm just going to ask it. So, there are many apps, including the one I use, that include a landing page or a storefront, they call it. When is it necessary to switch into a real website versus the one built in inside the app? Why would I do that if my business is, let's say, 15, 20 clients? Do I need to do that, or is it not necessary at this moment?
I love that question. Thank you for asking that. And I think you're right. I think that is relevant to many folks because I would say if you're using Pro Coach, landing page would be built in for you. That could be like a really quick, easy thing that you could use right away. Dana has shared earlier the landing page she's currently using through Flowdesk, right? Like so, just take it away. I
yeah.
want to do this.
So the two things I would wonder about first are if that landing page that comes with it, if you can optimize for SEO. So like the whoever had the Flowdesk landing page, as far as I know, off the top of my head, you cannot optimize that for SEO. So like yes, that's still a link she can post on Instagram and email and that kind of thing, but from an SEO perspective, which is what I always think about, she can't, again, as far as I know, you can't optimize that. So I'd wonder if your landing page can be optimized for SEO, and does it look good on mobile? And is it your actual domain, or is it like your name.procoach.com, like one of their kind of domains? Because if it's not, then it's not truly your domain. Now, with your question about like, I only have 15 to 20 clients, that's, like I have a cap. I'm the same way. I work one to one. I can only work with so many people in a year. I typically work with about 15 to 20 people a year, and that's it. But now, as a coach, you might have them on retainer. They might do like a 3-month package, 6-month package. Obviously, that kind of depends on your business. For me, and potentially for you, like those clients have kind of a limit. At some point, their budget might run out, they meet their goal, they don't want to work with you anymore. Maybe you only do a 6-month package and that's it. And it's like you're done. So thinking about, okay, well, you have 15 clients now, but what if 5 of them quit, they move on, whatever? How are you going to fill those spots? And can you create like a wait list? So right now, people who want to work with me, they have to wait till May because I'm booked until May with clients, but my website is still out there, like bringing people in. They're getting on my email list, connect with me on Instagram, whatever it is. And so they're still becoming a warm lead so that I can then either convert them on Instagram, get them on my email list, anything like that. So that's what I would say. And you also asked like, when do you switch? I mean, I don't have like a perfect timeline because again, it kind of depends on all of those things. But at a certain point, the landing page, I don't think is going to be enough for you. So it's really, again, going back to like that building trust with people and they're going to be looking for more information. And so, do you want to, like, are you having to deal with a lot of DMs right now and answering questions or getting on calls? Like, I work with, again, 15 to 20 people a year. Maybe half of them want to call with me, but I have lots of people who are like, hey, like, I need a website. Great, like, send me a contract. Like, they don't, like, they've learned so much about me that they don't even need a call with me because my website has done all the selling for me. So that's something else you could think about is your capacity with like DMs and calls, and could the website be giving them more information?
So just what you're talking about here, I think like it's that what if I didn't have to do all of the heavy lifting when it
Hmm.
comes to nurturing a person from cold to warm to buy,
Hmm.
right? Like what if it didn't have to be done like by hand every
Yeah.
single time, and if the website could actually do some of that work, right? Like I really love, like for me the biggest compliment is when people get on a call with me for the first time and they say you're exactly like I thought you would be, because they have found me on Instagram and they found me on my newsletter and they saw a video, right? Like there is enough pieces out there that has actually done that work for me already, and I don't
Hmm.
need to start establishing rapport with you when we talk for the first time, because they've had chances to do that on their own and I don't have to do anything for it. That
Right.
stuff is already out there. So we're talking about the website being able to do that. I think the word necessary also trips me up always when
Mm.
I say like, is it necessary? When is it necessary? Because strictly speaking, it's never necessary.
Right.
If it works, it works, right? If there is no
Mhm.
problems that you're looking to solve, then there are no problems to solve. Let's not solve problems for the sake of solving problems. But I think there are a number of problems that can be either solved or addressed through having a website that reflects you, that is up to date, that has long form content, that is optimized for SEO. And that is maybe not doing all the nurturing yourself, maybe not relying on social media so much, maybe having a bit of an idea of where the next client comes from. That is one of the tensions I hear from people a lot working with coaches
Mhm.
myself, because Jess and I are working with the same people essentially, right? So
Mhm.
the big thing is like, well, I have 5 clients now, or I have 10 clients now, but 3 months are up or 6 months are up, and all of a sudden 3 of them leave. And like there is this panic. It's like, well, where are the next 3 clients gonna come from?
Mhm.
And how can maybe my website help me do that? Does that
Yeah.
does that ring true? Just like some of
Hmm.
the things you mentioned?
Yes. Yeah. I really like what you said about, well, it's never really necessary because yes, if it's working, it's working. But like again, the capacity for DMs, for calls, not relying on social media as much. Like I have realized, Like I knew this, I think like subconsciously, but I realized in the last few months that I'm not as bothered by like algorithm changes on Instagram and all that kind of stuff because Instagram is just fun for me. Like, I mean, I use it for my business. Kate saw, like, I post lots of content, I make sure it's helpful, but it's fun for me because I don't have the pressure of like, oh, this reel needs to like get 5 DMs and like I need to start 5 conversations and I'm just connecting with people, I'm educating. I'm not feeling the pressure that this content has to convert every single time. Whereas a lot of coaches are like, I gotta like post 3 times a day or 2 times a day, and I have to do this many stories. And then they're like, oh my gosh, my reach is down. And like, yeah, I don't love that my content doesn't have great reach on Instagram. Like, no one enjoys that. But I'm not as bothered by it because I'm still getting clients and inquiries. Like, I got an inquiry this morning, a lady, I don't recognize her name at all, and she literally said, I found you on Google. Like, whereas when Melissa inquired, like, I was like, oh my gosh, it's Melissa. Like, I know her from Instagram. But from like getting people from Google and like, I could disappear from Instagram for a week, a month, and I don't think it would have a huge impact on my business.
Well, I think just one of the things I'm actually wondering about here, and I think this is a big question that's floating in all of our minds, is like running a business is sometimes feels like, well, like running a house, really. Like I'm in a house that is a patchwork of renovations and extensions that's probably like 120 years old, right? Like so the joke, like where we are, I'm like kind of ruralish Ontario in Canada. The joke in our neighborhood is what are we going to spend the next $10,000 on, right? Because
Mm,
like, is it a sidewalk? Does the roof need replacing? Is there like there's always something. So
yes.
it's never finishing. It's just where are we going to spend the next thousand or $10,000 on, like what are we going to fix next?
Hmm.
And I think when it comes to running a business, uh, like at least for me, like I'm a small business owner as well, right? Like so it's like, what am I going to spend my next $1,000 on? And
Hmm.
there is a lot of competition because like, okay, well, do I take another certification? Do I
Hmm.
hire a bookkeeper so I don't have to figure out my own freaking taxes, tax season, right? Like, do I hire a virtual assistant who will help me organize my Instagram post? Or do I have somebody build me a website? So
Hmm.
how would you like how do we think about this and how do we think about the website fitting in? Like how do we decide that it is
Mm.
indeed a website? And maybe drop even like some numbers that is roughly like as a starting out coach, what is the budget I'm thinking of? Like I'm thinking, 12 years ago when I had my very first website built for me, nobody gets stuck to that number as 12 years ago. It was $900, right? And now when I'm considering, having a website built, I'm probably thinking of a $2,000 to $5,000 like budget.
Hmm.
How would talk a little bit about that, like money,
Yeah.
investment, what's next? What do we spend money on and how much is it?
Yeah, so the price range is going to vary widely, just like I'm sure a lot of coaches and like your prices vary widely. You probably see people outside this space that are charging way less, way more. So I would say 2 to 5 thousand is like, especially the 2 to 3 thousand is like bare minimum, and you're probably working with someone who's a beginner. So I would say more around the 4 to 6 thousand is more in line with where you want to be. But that also depends on like I have a package that is $2,900, but that only gets you 3 pages. You get home, about, and services. So it's kind of like a starting off point. My basic like full website with 6 pages is 6,500. And I know from looking at competitors, like that's pretty normal these days. You might see a little bit lower than that, or even a little bit more than that, but that is roughly what you're going to be spending is 4 to 6 thousand, unless again, like I have that smaller package. Some people charge way more. You're also looking at, so it's really comes down to how long the person has been in business, what all are they offering, because some have SEO like me, like SEO is included, some don't. So even and they that doesn't mean they're going to charge less. They might still charge $5,000 and not do SEO. It might be there. I know there are a lot of designers who offer kind of templated design at a much lower cost, similar to like mine with just the 3 pages. It's like I have this kind of standard template. You can customize XYZ things, and that's kind of what you get. Some include copywriting, some include branding, some don't, some charge more if they include those things. So it really depends. I think the number one thing that affects price is how long they've been in business and if they are specialized or not. Because if they're newer in business, they don't really have the confidence or the skills to necessarily charge more. And if they're not specialized, they're trying to reach a broader audience and might just be able to charge less. So,
Well, I'm thinking there's like almost an evolution, right, in terms of like what it is you're going to look for as a coach, because as you're starting out, right, and Melissa said that in the chat earlier, it's like please don't have the website stopping you from.
right.
That's one of the things. It's just I said maybe we'll disagree, but I think we ended up exactly on the
Yeah.
same page, because as a somebody who's a behavioral change coach, I will always be biased towards like let's just get started and figure it
Yes.
out, right? Like because that's
Mm-hmm.
the biggest thing. But Jess said pretty much the same thing, where there might be no website at all, where you have stable presence on the social media platform of choice, where like the focus is, like I always say, cash flow. Can't be a coach if you
Mm-hmm.
don't, if you're not coaching anyone. So you need people to coach to be a coach. And then maybe your next step after that, like you can use a flow desk landing page or a pro coach landing page, or just like a ready for you, insert the blank and here's a page. And
Mm-hmm.
then after that, maybe you do have someone who puts together a templated website for you, and it's not SEO optimized, and it doesn't really do bells and whistles, and it doesn't come up in Google, but you do have a website. And then maybe you have been at it for a few years. I think, like Melissa was saying, also like she's DIY'd her website and used that for years. And then it was kind of time for the grown up website, for the
Mm-hmm.
big girl website, right? And that's where Jess has come in, and you heard kind of the budget, right? Like, so 2, 3K, it's the basic website. 4 to 6, 4 to 7K is going to be kind of like your custom professionally built website. And I encourage
Yeah.
people to kind of think about it the same way we want our clients to think about hiring a coach. Because if a friend asked me tomorrow, I said, well, I want to hire a running coach. How much should I be aiming to spend? I will say $200 to $400 a month. And if they
Mm-hmm.
will say, oh my God, I was thinking 30, I will say, don't worry about a coach. How about we get you a templated plan from Training Peaks, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that will give you some structure, and that might just meet you where you're at. Like, but like we're just kind of in a different points
Yeah.
of
Mm-hmm.
reference, right? Like,
Yeah.
so that's how
The
I would.
other thing, two other things I want to mention. One, a lot of designers do payment plans. I do. And two, there's a common misconception that I just want to address. You do not have to pay a designer ongoing. Like a lot of my clients are like, what is the ongoing cost? I mean, yes, you have to like pay for the website hosting ongoing, like you have to pay like the monthly like Squarespace fee or WordPress or whatever. But you do not have to pay a designer. There are designers or developers out there who require that their clients host with them and that you pay them 100, 300, whatever dollars a month for them to manage your website. That is absolutely an option if you have the budget and you're like, I want to do nothing with my website. If I just want to be able to email this person and be like, here's a testimonial, add it to the website or whatever. That is not a requirement. I do not host my clients' websites at all. I refuse because um, one of my first, I had 2 clients. They were like two of my earliest clients. Both of them came to me the one, she was like, my domain was hosted by my designer and she died. So like, how do I get access to my domain? Like her, that's like as if her email was in my inbox, like that I hosted her email. Like, how am I supposed to log in? I don't know her login information. And another one, the designer, like just she was like, I don't know, they moved overseas and like I can't get a hold of them. Like they just completely disappeared. And I don't know how to even like log into my website. And so I want my clients to have full ownership of everything in case something happens to me. And that is something I would advocate for you as well. Like, if you are like, I really just want someone else to manage it, whatever, make sure they have some kind of backup plan. Like, ask them what happens if they end up in the hospital tomorrow and like you need to access your site. What is the plan there? Um, so just want to make sure like you don't have to budget some kind of ongoing fee for a designer unless you really want to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Chris, I think the last thing I wanted to ask you, and then we'll pivot a little bit, but I really wanted to mention it because I thought it was such a fun project. Let's take like a couple of minutes because I want to share it with folks. What is the state of online business survey? How
Oh,
did it
yes.
come about? And I actually want to share a link to that. Talk.
Yeah. So last year I did this survey and I'm doing it again this year. And it's totally anonymous. It's takes like 2 minutes to fill out. And it's just a survey I did it just to get more insight into the online business space about transparency about what we're paying ourselves and what our teams look like. Because if you've been in the online space for any amount of time, you probably are seeing like make $10,000 tomorrow with an ebook and like I make six figures a month when I'm sleeping and and it's like obviously I can't survey every single business owner out there, but it was really eye-opening. It's also interesting just to see like what tools people are using, what they're struggling with. And it was really eye-opening last year. And so I'm doing it again right now. The survey will close at the end of the week, but I compile all the data and put that into a blog post. And yeah, it's really interesting data, and I don't get anything out of it other than just like being a nerd.
Well, I mean, I just like we get nosy. Like it's like anytime
Yes.
there's like money involved or numbers
Hmm.
involved, like we get nosy, which is why like you see coaches like, what are you guys all charging? Like
Hmm.
email platform are you guys using? I love
Yeah.
it. Like, so I shared a link to the 2024 survey that just did, which like just looked at like, here's who took the survey. Like, are people, how many years people have been in business? Do they have employees or not? How much are they
Hmm.
paying themselves? How much are they charging? What email platform are they using? I was like, ooh, nosy. So
Yes. It's
just
so fun.
currently collecting that data for 2025. I already filled it out. I encourage you guys to fill it out. And when Jess writes it up for 2025, I will share it in the community just so we can nosy in some more.
Yeah.
Cool.
Haesung has her hand up.
Yeah, hey, son, go ahead.
Thank you. This is so helpful.
Yay.
I'm creating a website, but I'm adding a lot of recipes to it.
Hmm.
I was wondering with so many websites out there with recipes, like well, have you worked with a lot of clients that
Hmm.
post a lot of recipes, and what would you say are like the most important things, when you're posting recipes?
Um, One is to be very detailed. One thing that I always recommend is just like studying other bloggers. Not that we're copying, but like study, like Google just like how I don't sourdough bread. Like how to make gluten-free sourdough. That's something I've been working on, if you can tell. And reading through the posts and paying like, okay, so this post showed up in the number one spot. Like, what am I seeing in this post? again, not that we're copying, but like, okay, so how many paragraphs does she have? What is she talking about? Typically with recipes, I one thing that newer people do is just like, oh, like I'm going to show you how to make brownies. Here's the brownies. Ta-da. But and I'm sure you've kind of seen like the memes or the jokes about like recipe bloggers, and you're like, why are you telling me your story about your grandma passing down this recipe? Like, I just want to get to the recipe. It's for SEO. Like it really it's just for SEO. So not that you have to talk about like where the recipe came from or whatever, but for brown like what else can you replace? Like how can I make these dairy-free brownies? How can I make these brownies gluten-free? Can I freeze the brownies? Can like thinking through like questions that people will have about the recipe, the brownies, like whatever it is, that is super helpful. And then in general, even just with other posts, but recipes too, photos and image, I almost said photos and images. That's the same thing. Photos and videos are also helpful on any post because Google calls that dynamic content. And basically, it's making it more helpful because imagine like the textbooks that we studied in college. Yes, there is a lot of text, but they do occasionally break it up with like colored boxes and photos and that kind of thing are helping break it up. And so it makes it more engaging. And so Google is like, oh, Hey Sung has text, she has recipes, she has photos, she has video. Like this is a very like holistic, not holistic like health wise, but like holistic post covering like different aspects of this recipe, that kind of thing. And Jason said like being able to jump to recipe, that is usually built into the plugin, which is a godsend. So like make sure you have that enabled so that people can skip. But yeah, I would just say making sure it's comprehensive. And if you can use a recipe plugin instead of just like normal text, that's going to help optimize it for SEO as well. Like it structures the data differently for Google. And so they like recognize it as a recipe better. So,
I see.
yeah.
And one last question is how
Yeah.
much is your, just in general, your audit?
So I don't
Month?
do an audit by itself. It's only part of the accelerator. I'll link to it in the chat because you basically can kind of cut. I've made it so you can customize the accelerator. If you do everything in the accelerator, it's 3,500. But if you just want like an audit and one other piece, then I think it's 1,500. But you can kind of like add pieces to it if you
Okay.
want. So,
And I
Thank
just
you
shared
so
the link.
much.
I shared the link to Jess's
okay.
website.
Okay.
Thank you.
Folks hop on, check it out, and also maybe just even take a look because what Jess was saying, like, do the research for recipe websites and what does a good recipe website look like.
Mm-hmm.
Even from that perspective, again, it's meta, where you can hop on to Jess's website to see what a website looks like,
Mm-hmm.
built by someone who knows websites for a particular niche. What does it have and what does it not have? What does it say? How does it say it? Are you finding everything you would expect to find in what places? Because even when it comes to like your offers and transparency, what's included, what's not included, I think all of that you can glean some insights from Jess's
Mm-hmm.
website. So a couple of things for you. Fill out that survey if you have a chance. It literally is 2 minutes. I think that will be super fun. I'll share the data once Jess compiles that. Check out Jess's website, say hi on Instagram. And Jess, thank you so much for your time today.
Yes.
Really
Yes. And like absolutely feel free to DM me questions. I know like maybe not everyone got to ask questions or whatever. I'm very open to questions on Instagram, so feel free to reach out um, if you want to ask anything else.
Thank you. This is great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome. Glad I got to chat.